thing that says recording. Perfect. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Yeah, so what I was just saying is we're going to start from with a bit of the background that we've already talked about in one of our previous team meetings to give the full context for why we're holding these practice sessions. One of the reasons I said earlier was that we're sort of like this professional sports team, and our sport really is writing. But the problem is we don't really get taught how to write. At least we don't get taught how to write for the type of writing we have to do here. So I'm going to go through the problem. What is the objective of the writing that we're doing? And the article that some of you that we've talked about that I attached to the email, The Science of Scientific Writing, it has 7 principles for improving writing. And I think that's what we can focus on for our writing practice. Try to learn those principles and try to help each other in applying those to our writing.
Guess what, guys? You just signed up for the job of writer. You did. I mean, you are going to live and die, not only by the quality of the research you produce, but more by your ability to get it out fast enough and to get it into the right place, into the hands of the right readers. Scientists are writers. Sorry, I didn't like that either. I had a high school teacher who was so disappointed I was going into science because he said, she writes so well, and I thought, heck with that. So I find it very amusing that this is what I do now. So scientists are writers. Let me give you one more twist here. It's not just this, that's an easy sell. I mean, look, let's be clear. You're going to be writing, and you can think, oh, I'm not going to run a research lab in an institution. I consult in the pharmaceutical industry. I've worked for government agencies. That's what scientists do. That's what experts do. They produce texts. Your job will be as a writer. Except if you're a scientific writer, your job is a bigger job than most of the writers out there. Because what distinguishes scientific writing from other writing and other disciplines is not that we write about numbers, so do economists. Or not that we write about images, so do art historians. But the thing about economists and art historians is they write single-authored documents. And we don't, do we? We write multi-authored documents. So not only will you be spending your career writing a good percentage of the time, but you will be writing with other people. So guess what? Not only are all scientists writers, they are all de facto teachers of writing.
We all have to be writers. We all have to get good at writing and teaching others how to write, because we're always doing multi-author documents, which is very true.
When the question is, what do I say next? And what do I say next? And I got 5 pages to fill before Tuesday if I'm in a writing class. What am I going to say? I only have half a page to say now. Okay, and how am I going to do this? Or you got the situation of, I've only got 150 words for this abstract, but I've got 400 words and I still haven't said what's important to me, and it's due tomorrow, because it's always due tomorrow, right? And because you're spending so much time in the laboratory getting the data, and because writing, you should know how to do this. You can just do it in your sleep. So we're constantly in this situation where we're in a panic, typically, or at least concerned about what am I going to say next? And then we get all this negative feedback because it seems whatever you say next is the wrong thing. Okay, yeah, so let's go there. So I work mostly with students. What I have are courses for graduate students at Princeton. And so I work with graduate students, but I also meet with their faculty. So let me tell you a secret that I tell all my students. Your faculty are expert writers. They're not expert teachers of writing, and they often don't even have a language for capturing their expertise. They've learned it the hard-earned way. They've been copy edited to death, which is the only way we knew how to teach writing until about 30 years ago. Go in and change it for somebody. See the changes I made? Yeah, I see those changes. Now you know what to do. Great. Yeah, if I ever think that thought exactly this way, I'll know what to do. How do I think a different thought? So we need a more systematic approach. So your advisors, the professors here, they couldn't be here if they were not expert writers. But they don't have a language, and that's what I've been trying to develop for talking about their expertise. And so they don't have a way of passing that on to their junior colleagues. When the question is,
Sorry. So that's what we're here to do, is to develop our ability to help each other develop this language that she's describing. And it's totally true. I always find it difficult to help students with their writing because I don't know how to do it without just trying to rewrite it. And finding a systematic way to do that is, I think, what we all have to get better at doing.
Everything we've been taught about how to write better, I think, is at least flawed or outright false. Every single piece of major advice to write it, to make it clearer, make it shorter. No, wrong. Number of words in a sentence has nothing to do by itself with quality. I can show you a 130-word sentence that's clear as a bell and a 13-word sentence that's totally opaque. Avoid the passive. Single worst thing we teach about the language, and we teach it constantly. You cannot write sophisticated English about complicated matters without a complete control and skillful usage of the passive voice. What does the passive do? It changes the position of the furniture in the room. Jack loves Jill is active. Jill is loved by Jack is passive. Jill and Jack have changed locations. What is the principal concept in back of the reader expectation approach? That 85% of our clues for interpretation as readers come not from word choice or word meaning, but rather from the structural location of words. Where a word shows up in a sentence will control most of the use to which it has been put. So what I teach now, and since those early days, is what those locations are and what those expectations are.
So that's the key here. It's 85% of the value of a piece of writing comes from its structure. So we really have to understand how we structure our writing to make it effective. Yeah, so we'll get into that. That's the 7 principles we're going to talk about are all about how we fix the structure, how we make our structure better. What is the objective? And the first time I saw this video, it really opened my mind to the goal of writing. What are we trying to do when we're putting anything in writing or presenting something for that matter? What I'm trying to do right now is I'm trying to help you change the way you think about writing. I'm trying to change the way you approach this whole thing that you've probably been doing for many, many years. But we have to change what the person, where our goal is to change how they think about some part of the world.
And in the real world, not the world you're in now, the function of that text is to cause readers to change what they think about the world. That's its job. It's to cause the readers to change what they think about the world. And whether or not it's valuable depends on whether or not the readers perceive that you have valuably changed what they think, or what they do, or how they decide. And I would be willing to bet that in your schooling years, you virtually never did that.
In this video, what he goes on to talk about is up until university, even undergrad university, what we are taught about writing is really, the goal is really to help the teacher who's paid to evaluate you. They're looking at your writing to evaluate you, to learn about you. But as professional writers now in academia or wherever you go after this and try to get, sell something to someone, or you want to sell a service or a product or whatever, what the goal there is to change what someone thinks about the world and see value in what you're offering. So the problem is that no one really teaches us how to write well, and no one teaches us how to teach writing. The objective is going to be to try to change how the audience sees the world, and we'll go through 7 principles of improving our writing. These 7 principles come from work, it comes from that paper that I mentioned that I sent out, The Science of Scientific Writing by George Gopin. So he's the audio file that you heard. That was an interview by him, with him, and Judith Swan, who is, I think was kind of his student, and Larry McInerney was Joseph Williams student, and Joseph Williams wrote in 1981, it seems like he was the first person to come up with these general principles to writing that kind of redefines the way we teach writing and how to get value out of writing. And it's this book called Style, Towards Clarity and Grace. And then, as I mentioned, George and Judith wrote the book, this article that I sent you in 1990, about the science of scientific writing, which is one of the most popular articles that American scientist ever published. It also happens that those two sources were what I was given when I took a writing course through the University of Toronto's Graduate Center for Academic Communication. I took one of these I'm not sure what it was called exactly, but I think it was like thesis writing tips, or a workshop on thesis writing, and these are still offered now. Jane Freeman, who you see the name on there at the bottom, she was my teacher, the prof that ran that course, the instructor, and I think she's now the director of that writing program. And these were both sources that she drew on heavily. I think I'd bought this book for a long time. It's out on my shelf. I never opened it, but she directed me to Style, Towards Clarity and Grace, and she took us through this Science of Scientific Writing, the article. So it's a really good sign, I think, that that we have access actually at the University of Toronto to this resource. I think they will set up 45-minute meetings with students if they want to go over their writing for school based things, for proposals and things like that. And I think we should be making use of that. And I recommend that everyone take one of the writing courses for graduate students. You should go and take one of their thesis proposal writing courses. And I think Jane Freeman was fantastic. I'm sure the others are good too, but I'll just put that plug in there. All right.
We work with people who are experts in the way they think about the world. I work with biochemists, neurobiologists, anthropologists, historians, lawyers, fill in the blank. They have one thing in common. They're experts in the way they think about the world. They deal with very complicated information, lots of subtlety, lots of nuance, lots of sophistication, lots of complexity, and they think at very high levels. They also write. Now, 99% of them write and think at the same time. That is, they use their writing process to help themselves to think. You do this. While you're writing your stuff, you're still thinking of your ideas. To help yourself do your thinking, you have to do your writing. You have to do this because the stuff you're thinking about is too damn complicated to just do it in your head.
So this is where I think I remember being frustrated, but like writing is hard. It's a hard, iterative process. We should all be aware that you will not magically have an idea in your head and be able to put it down on paper in its final form. That is not the way academic writing ever works. You have to write things down and come back and revise it and look at it again and say, do these things make sense together? Is this the right thing I'm trying to say? And move things around and correct apply those principles that we're going to talk about today. That is at the basis of this. I think there's in high school, I remember getting this message that you write this outline and then you take your outline and then you write the paper after you write the outline. Larry talks about this in one of his videos. But in reality, no one really writes challenging documents like that. You basically have to start with something. You can have an outline. There's nothing wrong with having an outline, but once you start getting paragraphs on a page, it's looking at those, rereading, and then revising. That is the process we have to go through for the type of writing we do.
Here's the challenge. You write this text, this grant proposal, this article, this dissertation proposal, this book. You actually generate it on the horizontal axis. You actually generate the text while you are doing your thinking. But then you're going to send this text out to readers. And the readers are going to look through that text, and if you've done your job, they're going to change the way they see the world.
We already talked about that. That's what we're talking about doing. Sorry. Here's the problem.
And here's the problem. Very predictably, experts use language in one set of patterns to do their thinking, but those very same experts read with a different pattern. So here's what happens. You have used your text as you must use it to help yourself think, but you're going to use writing patterns and language patterns that interfere with the way your readers read when they read, even when those readers are also other experts. So you are interfering with their reading process when you're writing. I promise you, you are.
The best example is in this paper, Science of Scientific Writing, of this idea, I think, is where they show how if you wanted to, you could write down, if you have data from a study where you're measuring the change in temperature of something over time, you could write in aligned one thing after another, time at time 1 or time 15 seconds, I guess that is, time 15 seconds or 15 minutes, it's 32 degrees, and at time 0, oh, this is even out of order. Yeah, in this case, he's just listing pairs of time and temperature, not even in order of time. That's like the most confusing way you could put that information and make sure that the reader would never be able to interpret it easily. A better way would be to put it in a table like this, and where you have time on the left and temperature on the right, and you can start to see what's happening. You can see the relationship more easily. Human beings, our frail brains, are able to make sense of the bottom thing better than the top thing, right? An even better way, I would argue, is probably to create a graph of that, is to have a little XY graph and show time on the horizontal axis and temperature on the vertical axis, and show that temperature going up. That's the kind of structural thing that we have to look out for, and these 7 principles will help us avoid mixing up.
What happens to readers when you do that? The first thing that happens is you slow down. And rereading is a version of slowing down. You either read more slowly the first time, or you have to read and reread and reread and reread. You slow down. We're going to get back to why this matters in a minute. Second, you don't understand. Third, come on, you get aggravated. Then you're done, right? You're done. Now, when this happens to you and you reread and reread, why did you do that? Why didn't you just stop?
Because I need to read the content or understand the content of that paper.
That's exactly right. What do you suppose happens if they don't need to read it? They don't. The problem is, forgive me for saying this, you have no idea how to handle that problem.
So these are the seven principles that we're going to try to get better at applying to our own writing. These are from the document I sent out earlier. 2 of them have to do with understanding the subject. What is the subject doing, or what is who is the subject, making it clear who the subject is. We'll just play this video.
So 2 sentences. The dog chased the cat, and the cat was chased by the dog. As I said yesterday, I've used this sentence for literally thousands of people in hundreds of sessions. And in the US and in some places around the world, I've asked the question, which of these sentences is clearer and more concise? And I can guarantee you that in the United States, 90% of people will immediately say the first sentence is clearer and more concise. And they'll give you 2 reasons for it. It's shorter, and it has an active verb. This is nonsense. I just need to be, it's complete, patent, obvious nonsense. It is simply not true that sentences are more concise when they're shorter and they have active verbs. What is the mistake people make about this is that they're measuring effects of language without thinking about the readers. So,
when readers of English, and I don't know whether it's always true, but we think it's true of native speakers of English. When readers of English read a text to think about the world, to think about the content of the text, they read in very predictable patterns. And one of the patterns is that they read subjects in very particular ways. They do something special with subjects. Another way to put it is, subjects have a function for readers' cognitive processing that's very distinctive. And it has a lot to do with the reader's impression of what's clear and what's concise. So, you all are storytellers, you can tell me, which readers will find this sentence less clear and less concise, and would find this sentence more clear and more concise? Which readers? Anybody who wants to know about the cat. The effect of subjects on readers is to create the focus of the sentence. When they process a sentence, the subject is what the sentence is about. So, this is a sentence about a dog. This is a sentence about a cat. What if the audience cares about the cat?
So that's that. So obviously he's making a really simple point there, but we screw this up all the time, I think is his point. So we want to start sentences, put the subject of the sentence near the beginning, and then we want to follow it as soon as possible with the verb is one of the principles. This is an example from the course I ran. One of the students wrote this sentence. So if you look at the part near the bottom, this combined solution is the subject, but then there's all this stuff that the student put in before they got to the verb. So that makes it hard it's a pattern of writing that makes it hard for readers to understand what's happening in that sentence. There's this other thing called the stress position and the topic position that we can talk a little bit about. The topic position, stress position, so you put backward, we want to put backward linking information in the topic position, and you want to put the subject, the person, thing, or concept whose story it is in the topic position. So the subject, another word for subject, in the topic position. Sometimes what happens is we can be unclear about what the topic, what the subject is. In this case, this three-stage solution in purple here is referring back to what we talked about in the stuff that came before this second sentence. Whoops, sorry. What came before. So having these four words helps link the rest of this sentence back to the previous sentence. So that's what you want to put in that topic position. It could be made even clearer by having shared, if, for instance, the sentence had added the word three and even numbered the three different things that they're talking about. This is one of the suggestions I had for this student, was to make it really clear what you're talking about, what you're referring back to. If you have the number three and these three things enumerated, it makes it even clearer what this next sentence is going to talk about. The three-stage solution refers to these three stages. The other thing we want to do with the stress position is make sure we put the emphasis-worthy information there. This is another sentence from a student in my class where you can see the topic sentence here is carbon monoxide poses a significant threat due to its poisonous and dangerous nature. In this case, she's put the stuff in the stress position as characterized by its odorless and colorless properties. This to me feels like more of a throwaway bit of information that is not what they want to stress. Instead, what they probably want to stress is something about how poisonous and dangerous it is. So this is a mistake that I make and made a lot until I really started thinking about it recently. Probably a better way to write this is to say something about how poisonous and dangerous carbon monoxide is near the end of the sentence. Where I struggled with this sentence in trying to suggest a fix for it is this fix puts the subject away from the verb. It sticks this the blue stuff in between the subject and the verb poses. So then I thought, is it better to put it this way? I think the third version of this sentence is the better one, but I'm not positive. I'd love to get someone's, we can talk about that as a group later if we want, if people have suggestions on that. We're almost through these. Yeah, we already talked about placing old information to link backwards. I can give one example of how we get this wrong sometimes. I see this very commonly in student writing. We say things like, this 3-stage solution comprises 3 different things, and then the next sentence starts with the word this. And so that becomes the subject of this sentence, this, but what do you mean by this? The technical term for this is an unclear antecedent. It's not clear if you're talking about all 3 things. Are you talking about the 3-stage solution, or are you talking about the last thing that you mentioned here? Galvanic skin response sensors to measure subepidermal moisture levels. So it's always better to clarify, never use the word this to refer back if there's any confusion, if there's any potential confusion. You could say this 3-stage solution, I think that's what I suggest, or this combined solution, which I'm trying to correct that by saying everything, all of these 3 things, this combined solution does the next thing as linking backwards. Number 5 has to do with the verb. So articulating the action of every clause or sentence in its verb. Basically, there are better verbs to use and there are worse verbs to use for some sentences. This is an example of a weak verb. Sometimes I think that coincides with passive sentences is passive verbs. In this case, that's what's happening. The decision to construct a health sciences building was made by the university trustees. But thinking about this sentence, the sentence could be rearranged to use a better verb, which is decided to construct. Decided is what is, rather than using the decision as a noun or as the subject, the university trustees as the subject makes this a better verb. I'm not sure if this last sentence captures the meaning in the right way for the audience, but it's one way to try to make verbs stronger. And the last 2 things are kind of vague here. I'll let you read through these in detail more. What I take away from it is what you're emphasizing and giving context for from one section to another. To me, it's about coherence, making a piece of writing coherence.
Most speeches, and Lord knows, most written texts that end with the big information are incoherent to the reader's experience along the way. That is, the readers, the audience, they're listening for the first few minutes, they're reading for the first few pages, then they're lost, they're confused, they stop listening, they stop reading, or if they continue on, by the time you get to the end, it had nothing to do with the beginning. Well, of course, if you ask the writer will say, of course it has everything to do with the beginning. But that's not how the audience experiences it. That's not how the readers experience it. So what I want to talk to you, and as I said, to use the Gettysburg Address to show you the techniques that Lincoln uses to make sure that the audience's experience is one where the beginning is connected to the end and connected all the way through their experience of listening to the speech. Now, there's a million ways that speeches can be coherent for audiences. There's emotional coherence, there's cultural coherence, there's psychological coherence, there's a million kinds of coherence, and I'm only going to talk about a couple of them here, a couple that are based in language. But I'm going to talk about 2 major categories of these. Let me give you the examples not from words but from numbers. Okay, here's a sequence that I'm sure everybody in the room finds coherent. You find it organized. You have no trouble getting from the beginning to the end. If I asked you what's the next number, everybody would say, oh, it's 7. Well, let me give you another one. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. Now I will ask you to raise your hand if you find this coherent, which means if you could tell me the ending of the sequence. Just raise your hand. Look around the room and see how few people are raising their hands. All right? This is one of the biggest problems that writers, speechwriters have in creating coherence, which is they appeal to a source of coherence that many people in the audience do not recognize. So what you've got is you've got a couple of people who are completely coherent to tell you not just the next number, but the one after that and the one after that and the one after that. But you've also got a sea full of people who are lost and lost track of it. So if there's some big sacco ending and the speaker and the writer want to say, okay, drum roll, is everybody ready? 17. And he's like, yeah, right. I knew it was coming. And then the rest of you are, what? So for the record, those are the prime numbers, the numbers that are divisible only by themselves and 1, right? So this is a really common problem for writing, and especially if you're writing to a mixed audience, which is you create coherence by appealing to a source of coherence that some of the people in the audience get and some of them don't. But I really want to draw the biggest comparison with this sequence. All right? 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4. Now, I'll ask you, what do you suppose the next number is? 1. Everybody gets it. Now, what's the difference between these two and this one? The difference is these two are creating coherence by appealing to a source of coherence you already knew. A source of coherence that, as it were, you brought to the room, to the speech. You knew it before the speech began. This is a source of coherence that the sequence itself creates. That is, your experience of this particular sequence is what creates the sense that we have coherence and order and that you can predict the ending. Lincoln's going to use both of these. He's going to appeal to some sources of coherence that existed in the listeners' heads before they ever heard the speech. But he's also going to very powerfully use this technique, which is to use language to create a coherence through the speech itself, not appealing to something outside the speech.
For us, the coherence is like if you have a proposal and you've got a background section and you've got aims and an objective and methods and you talk about impact. If you talk about something in the methods, you have to have introduced it in the background. You have to give some context to why you're using a particular approach or why this is a problem that you're trying to collect data on. It's making sure that throughout the document, having coherence throughout means having the same ideas show up and something new doesn't show up without context being given earlier. We don't give an objective or we don't talk about something in the methods without saying why it's important to be bringing in. It should be obvious when it comes in why it's important to our problem. So I think those are our 7 strategies. We can, Dawood, if you want, you can stop recording here.